Hello, my friends. Okay, this is the first video for Unit 6, which is our development unit. This is going to be kind of an introduction to a lot of the different pieces of development. So we're going to be talking a little bit about the main ideas of development, as well as the genetic and environmental influences on our behavior. So let's start with genetic influences on our behavior. The great debate, the huge debate that we've talked about previously is this debate about nature versus nurture. Remember, nature and nurture both impact our behavior in a way that makes it difficult to know which one is responsible for what types of our behavior. We don't really know sometimes, is it nature or is it nurture? Remember, nature are our genes, those are our DNA, what our parents give us, the inside parts of us, the biology. The nurture is going to be our environment. So things like school, our peer and parental influences, our culture, etc., etc. Both of these impact our behavior, and sometimes it's really hard for us to determine which one is actually more influential on the particular trait. So evolutionary psychology is a field of psychology where we apply the theory of evolution to behavior, obviously. Basically, it's saying that our behavioral similarities among the human race arise from our biological similarities. So all of those genetic things that we hold similar from one person to another are what give us those behavioral similarities from person to person. Evolutionary psychologists believe that our human motivation to do things derives from our desire to spread our own gene pool. Okay, so our motivation to do anything is because we just want to pass on our traits, our genes, to our future offspring. And all of our behavior can be boiled down into that motivation. Evolutionary psychologists also believe in gender differences, right? There are definitely differences in our genders. The first thing evolutionary psychologists say is that men are attracted to young women and women are attracted to older, more mature men. This is all because we have biological differences in reproduction, right? Women reproduce younger. Our prime is when we are younger. Actually, late teens to early 20s is our prime for reproduction, while men can reproduce anytime throughout their life. And so it is better for women or men to be attracted to young women because that's when they're in their prime to reproduce. Women are attracted to older men because it is going to be better for us to have a well-established man who can provide for us. Overall, evolutionary psychologists say that nature selects behavioral tendencies that increase the likelihood of sending one's genes into the future. Natural selection, right? So our behaviors continue, or the behaviors that continue are the behaviors that are going to increase our chances of having small humans later on in our lives. Okay, behavior genetics. So this is a little bit of a crazy kind of subject that gets a little bit dicey. But what this is it's the study of whether or not our genes or our environment influences our behavior. Basically, they're looking at, is it nature or is it nurture? And in order to study this, they look at different types of studies or at different types of people. The best people to look at are identical twins, separated identical twins, and adopted children. And we're going to get into each one of these specifically so that you can understand why they are used, okay? Let's first look at twin studies. Identical twins and fraternal twins are different. So let's talk about how. So identical twins, sometimes I'll refer to them as monozygotic or MZ twins because they come from one egg, right? So there is one single fertilized egg. Here's the egg, here's the sperm, and then that egg splits into two different embryos, okay? So it's the exact same genes. We only have one egg, we only have one sperm. They split and they become two different humans. However, identical twins have exactly the same DNA because they come from the same egg. Fraternal twins, develop from two separate eggs. So these are dizygotic, okay? Two eggs. So here's one egg that was fertilized by a sperm. Here's another egg that was fertilized by a sperm. Both of these develop into separate humans. However, they have separate placentas, separate DNA. They are no more similar than any other siblings. So my three girls are the same, like, difference in genetics than any other fraternal twins, right? So fraternal twins do not share DNA, identical twins do. So research has found that identical twins are much more similar in things like their abilities, their personalities, their interests. And what this tells us is that genes do play a role, right? If identical twins are super, super similar in their personality, in their interests, in their abilities, that means that that DNA plays a role, right? So we study identical twins because their environments are similar. They're reared, they're brought up in the same household, so the environment is the same, and their DNA is the same. So we can tell that DNA is playing a role, okay? So why would we study separated identical twins? Well, Thomas Bouchard did study separated twins. And when we say separated twins, we mean twins separated at birth. Now, this doesn't happen very often anymore, but it does every once in a while happen. And this research started in 1979, and what it focused on was identical twins, so twins with the same DNA that were reared apart. Reared means to bring up, right? To raise them. So these identical twins that were raised separately in two separate households. Why do this? Well, it gives us two different environments. We know their DNA is the same, so their nature is kept constant. It's the nurture, the environment now that we can study. What role does nurture play in our development? This research is still ongoing. They're still looking for separated twins at birth, and they have studied over 100 pairs of identical separated twins. And what they have found is that heredity, so this is our genes, account for 64 to 74% of the differences seen in IQ between the identical twins. What does this mean? It means that the genes that we have play almost a 3/4 of the role in our IQ. Okay, so separated twins are going to have very similar IQs because of their genes. Okay, so one of the studies that they found, or one of the things that they find, is that these separated twins, sometimes when we put them together, some of the things that they have in common are insane, right? They are so similar that it's almost scary. Even though they're separated in different environments, they're still so similar. So this case, Jerry Levy and Mark Newman, these were identical twins who were separated at birth, and what they found were some crazy coincidences, right? So they had the same mustache, same sideburns, wore the same glasses, they had similar jobs. They both were volunteer firefighters, enjoyed hunting and fishing, watching John Wayne movies, enjoyed Chinese food. They both drank Budweiser, holding the can in an identical manner. So all of these things are very coincidental, that these things are very, very similar. However, we have to be careful because you and I could probably find a lot of these similarities among each other as well. So is it really our genes? That's the question. But there are some crazy coincidences among separated twins that they have found in this study. Okay, so why study adoption studies? Well, for the exact opposite, right? Adoption studies allow us to study the nurture, the environment. Adoption studies, we can control the environment. We know the type of environment that that kid is in, right? And then the genes are separate. So we are raising a child in a home that they do not share the same genes with their parents, right? And we want to see, will that child end up like their adoptive parents? And if it does, then that means that nurture, the environment, plays a larger role in our development. So what these adoption studies have found is that adoptees' personality traits are more similar to their biological parents than their adoptive parents. So our personality is more genetically dealt with, but however, parents do influence their children's attitudes, values, manners, faith, and politics, which isn't uncommon, right? Also, adoptive children tend to score higher on intelligence tests than their biological parents, as well as they tend to be more self-giving and altruistic. This isn't surprising because most of the time, children who are put up for adoption are from a family that might not be able to support the child. And so the child going into a home with parents that are maybe have a higher IQ or a better chance of living, they're going to raise them a little bit better, right? So it makes a little bit more sense. So adoption studies show us what is culturally or environmentally determined. The things that are environmentally determined are our attitudes, our values, our faith, our manners, so whether you say please and thank you, and then our political views. Okay, next we're going to get into a kind of touchy subject. Not touchy, but like it's hard to understand. So it's called heritability. Heritability is the difference due to our genes. Okay, so it's the extent to which the differences in appearance of a trait, so observable traits, so hair color, eye color, your skin color, all of those things, it's the extent to which those observable traits are due to the difference in our genes. Okay, so are they due to genes or are they due to the environment? If they're due to genes, then it is highly heritable, right? If it is due to the environment, then it is not. So the more inherited a trait is, the less heritable it is. So I think I said that wrong the first time. So if we have identical twins, they have very low heritability because they share the same genes. So their heritability is low because their differences are very low because they have the same genes. Okay? So the difference between my personality and your personality is highly heritable because we have different genes. So the chance that our personalities are due to our genes is pretty high because we have different genes. But the chance of personality traits between identical twins being due to genes, very low because they have the same genes. So they can't be due to the genes, right? It has to be due to the environment, okay? If you live near me, the differences are even more heritable because our environment is similar. So heritability looks at, are the differences that we are looking at due to genes? Okay? So if we share an environment, then we have a really, really high chance that the difference comes from genes, not from our environment. So siblings who are in the same household, their heritability is very high because they have the same environment, but their genes are different. Okay? Identical twins, because they share the same genes, the differences in those two people cannot be due to genes because they have the same genes. So their heritability is low. Okay? I know this is a little bit confusing, but the idea is, are those observable traits, personality, hair color, eye color, are those things due to the genes or are they due to our environment? If they're due to the environment, then the heritability is low. Okay? Okay, let's look at environmental influences. We're going to come back to this in part 2 of the video.